I support the any activism. If you want to support LGBT, trans, I think that's everyone deserves support, but it's not right morally to take money on behalf of cisgendered black men that are slain by the police, and none of that money go back to.
I want you to save some of those bars.
I'm done. That's it. That's all I got.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to GHH. That's Gentlemen's History Hour. I'm Equality.
I'm Rob J 10X. Hey, how you doing, brother?
I am doing good.
All right, we got a lot to talk about this week. There's a bit of a controversy that's been brewing in Black Lives Matter, particularly with Patrisse Cullors, who recently purchased some real estate that raised a couple eyes. Was priced at about $1.4 million. This follows the ire of a lot of people when the Tamika Mallory GE endorsement sponsorship brand at the Grammys came out. And it seems to be following a trend, maybe I would say probably starting with the Nike deal with Colin Kaepernick, where activists are now really becoming a part of these brand narratives and marketing. And I want to start with a question, brother. Is activism a lucrative business?
In 2020 or 2021, or the times that we've been living in, I would say, yeah, for certain people. Because let's just give some context on when we say activism. There are grassroots activists that are doing great things in the community. So I want to give that disclaimer. But as far as activism on a commercial level, it's like hip hop, underground, commercial. Yeah, it's beginning to be very lucrative.
Okay, and with the affiliation of companies in alignment with activists, even though the companies, at least from the outside looking in, position themselves to appear to be in alignment with the message of the activists, do you think that's leaving an opening for compromise or controlling the activist narratives?
Yeah, because sometimes they say the golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules.
Understood.
So the person that's paying you, you're not gonna bite the hand that's feeding you or bite the hand that's exploiting you, or
no, most definitely.
What have you.
I think it becomes a tricky thing because things do, activism does require resources, and I don't know how you can go about denying certain resources if they're needed. So on one hand, obviously if it's coming from with a nefarious intention, I understand definitely why you should raise a red eye. We do know that Malcolm X turned down $3 million, amongst other things. But I don't think there's ever been a time where there was so much gray area that activists were walking in, or at least it was so publicly accessible to see the gray area.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think from a morality standpoint, just personally as EQ, do you feel like an activist should have a certain, not necessarily limitation, but a separation between personal, finance and gains and their methodology? Or
it's similar to being a politician, and the word that comes to mind is being transparent, or the transparency. When you're raising money with the intent behind this is for community activism, I think people should be allowed to know how that money is being dispersed to the community that you're advocating for. Okay. If you're advocating for, just take it away, just say if you're advocating for animal rights, right? And you're raising this money, people should be allowed to say, okay, how much of that money is going actually toward the cause of animal rights?
I agree. I agree with the transparency part. Full disclosure, when I lived in Atlanta, I was a member of World Changers, which is a Creflo Dollar's church. I had no problem with his wealth because he made no qualms about how he felt about his right to be wealthy. So there was no deception in his presentation. But let me ask you this, because I know we took a deep dive offline historically, though. Historically, when leaders raised funds, was there some type of establishment of transparency, or were we able to follow along with the usage of funds maybe in a more clear way?
When preparing for this, I looked at Booker T. Washington, I looked at Marcus Garvey, I looked at the Nation of Islam. In particular, because of the sequential order of those organizations. Well, Booker T. Washington wasn't necessarily an organization, but as a person that had raised a lot of money from philanthropy or rich philanthropists. Let's say that. We know founding of Tuskegee University. That inspired Marcus Garvey. So we go 1900s, we go 1920s, and in the 1930s, we have the formation of the Nation of Islam. And then looking at those, and I had to bring my phones. I want to,
was freestyling off the phone.
We want to. Well, it's a lot. It's a lot of ground to cover, man.
No, definitely.
And I want, to put the information out there, and then to show people that information is right here.
No, most definitely. It's about being accurate, not about
So
else.
the National Negro Business League was started by Booker T. Washington. That was in the 1900s. So it predated the United States Chamber of Commerce by 20 years. It strived to enhance the commercial and economic prosperity of the African American community. So right off there, you have a mission statement for your organization. Booker T. Washington believed that solutions to the problems of racial discrimination were primarily economic, and that African American entrepreneurship was vital. Thus, he founded the League to further the economic development of African American businesses in order to achieve social equality in the American society. People have their views about Booker T. Washington. You take 100 people, 50 people may love him, 50 people may hate him. Now, some people will hold it against him and say, well, he was getting funding from Rosenwald and the Carnegies. But the transparency behind it, what we're talking about around that time period, we saw Tuskegee go from a shanty to an institution, a historically black institution that's been here for over 100 years.
Yeah.
So I can take my son, we can drive up there and we can see the fruits of the labor behind the funding that Booker T. Washington was receiving at that time.
I think even with the nation, you can always, you can see where they're spending the money. So I think, and as long as you can see something, it makes you, it really puts that at ease. But when that gray area, and to your point with a Booker T, where you can physically go to Tuskegee. There are people being educated. There are people. The school actually does exist. When we talk about like some other people like the Panthers, to your knowledge and research, were they, I've never heard him question early Panthers when they were at their prime about anything financial. How were they paying for the breakfast programs and stuff?
A couple of things with the Panthers. They did have donors, like anonymous donors around that time. Especially with the Free Huey campaign when Huey was locked up. They did what they would call canvassing the neighborhood, right, for the free breakfast program, meaning you're knocking on the doors of businesses to get them to solicit the food. So you're going to, let's say, the neighborhood grocery stores or places, or going through the community knocking on the door, just the grassroots way of doing it. So you have anonymous donors, because some people didn't want their money being associated with going to the Panthers for whatever reason around that time. But then you had Panthers that would canvass the neighborhoods and say, hey, we're out here with the Panthers. You have that presence, and you can go and ask those local businesses if they would like to donate food or money to the free breakfast program. Just a very grassroots way of doing it. And also you had certain Panthers that would go out and do speaking engagements to get money. So with the speaking engagements, soliciting donations and food from the local businesses in Oakland and those areas, or the other cities where they had the Panther organizations, just from a very grassroots way of doing it. And like I said, donations. I mean, getting those big dollar donations. There were a lot of Hollywood liberals that were quietly writing checks to donate to the Panthers, and this all documented.
Okay, well, let me ask you this: in our history as we know it, have we had major black civil rights or black issues activist leaders that were pretty much openly known as extremely wealthy, or could afford what was the equivalent in the 60s, 40s, 50s of a $1.4 million house, or those type of luxuries?
I mean, throughout history, people have accumulated wealth, but from the perspective of a person being over an organization, let's just say for a guy like Marcus Garvey, because that was the next person I wanted to talk about. I don't know if he was living a lavish lifestyle at that time. I'm not really sure, but let's just say he was living somewhat of a lavish, what we would equate, because Booker T. Washington was getting money too. Mm-hmm. He was getting personally funded by these philanthropists as well. But let's just say Garvey lived a lavish lifestyle. You have to say, okay, with that lifestyle and what's being produced, it's one thing to live a lavish lifestyle and you're away. Let's just say, let's bring it to hip hop, right? Rappers always talk about the street. Those rappers are saying that from a safe place behind a gated community. Mm-hmm. So we have documented proof that Marcus Garvey was in Harlem. Okay. So, and to give some context with Garvey, because remember, I wanted to set the tone in talking about Booker T. Washington and the money and the tangible outcomes. Yeah, we are receiving that money.
Booker and Booker, you got Tuskegee.
We got Tuskegee.
With Garvey, I know that we got. I don't know how successful it was, but we got the Star Line.
Yeah, he had the Black Star Line, which was not super successful because he wasn't a businessman per se. Yeah. But he was raising the money, and you knew he had a tangible outcome.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly.
So hey, one of my goals is I'm trying to create the Black Star Line. I want to be able to show people here, going back to Africa, and having even creating trade routes with nations on the continent. Okay. So you have something tangible to show for it. And one thing with Garvey, so what was created? The Universal Steam Laundry, a universal tailoring and dressmaking department. And this was in Harlem, because the attire that Garvey wore and the people in the UNIA. The Universal Negro Improvement Association. Okay. They had 3 grocery stores in New York and a printing press that Garvey produced, his organizational newspaper, The Negro World. And when we talked about the women, Amy Garvey was one of the co-founders of the newspaper. Okay. So now you're seeing how your money is being spent. Yeah. If you're donating to the organization, you're seeing some tangible outcomes.
Yeah, you get in the paper.
You had the Black Star Line. And one of Garvey's, when you brought up around that time and how people may have lived, one of his quotes was that we should have black people that are similar to like the Carnegies and people like that. Okay. Why should they be the only philanthropists?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I agree with that statement. I agree with the fact that we should have that level, because what happens to me when the people outside the black community are donating to black activists or black causes and black things like that, mm-hmm. Well, there's a double. Pretty much, there's 2 sides to it. Not to say that they're not in belief of the actual purpose of the black organizations they donate to, but there's also a public relations side to it, to where it's not necessarily in their interest or in their wheelhouse to even necessarily know what happens with the money. It's just the fact that, hey, we support black people. Yeah. And we gave somebody a check. That was our gift. Yeah. Versus somebody who was black, that was from the community and understood, that our plight. They would give that money, and then they would also have a certain set of expectations with that, and they would see certain things that I think if you, a liberal white company maybe isn't necessarily that concerned with after the money is given.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to mention with Garvey, he said, "Why should not Africa give the world its first black, or the world its black Rockefeller, Rothschild, or Henry Ford? Now is the opportunity. Now is the chance for every Negro to make every effort toward a commercial, industrial standard that will make us comparable with the successful businessmen of other races." So, once again, we're hearing what we would call mission statements.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, I just heard that. I was like, I need to put that on my wall.
So you're hearing that, but then you see the fruits materializing behind that mission statement. Mm-hmm. Now he says this, and then he goes and buys a $1.4 million house.
Yeah,
where it's only 1.8% of black people living in that neighborhood.
Yeah,
and it's 88% white. You may look at Garvey a little different, and you're not seeing any tangible outcomes. Mm-hmm. But when you hear the mission statement, it's clear, and the tangible outcomes are coming from that. Yeah. So you're saying, okay, I'm starting to see things materialize. I'm starting to see a grocery store. I'm starting to see some black businesses materialize.
Well, speaking of the black leaders, to me, outside looking in, I think one of the, at least who's been able to do it at an extended period for the longest time, I would have to say would be like Elijah Muhammad. And the fact that the nation, I can go to Detroit, I can see Mosque number 2 today. I can, a final call actually exists. I see an effort to actually create things from their organization. And I don't know if it's exclusively an incubated thing where they only self-invest or so their organizations would invest in
they were self-investing for the interests of black people. Let me say that.
Okay.
Because black people could profit from the fruits of the labor. Meaning, if I open up a business or a restaurant, I'm not just hiring Muslims to work there. I'm hiring non-Muslims. So I'm creating job opportunities in these communities. So it may be started by the NOI, the Nation of Islam, but that doesn't mean it's exclusive to just people of that same faith.
You bring up a real distinct point too, because I remember even going back to like the story of the Panthers and learning, Panthers didn't only bail Panthers out of jail.
That's true.
Panthers took their money and they bailed black people out of jail.
Yeah, they had money to the side for that. Yeah. The bail, like now, when people say we're raising money to get people out, and during the George Floyd protest, there was a lot of big name celebrities that were like, hey, we're gonna cover the bail money for people that were locked up during these protests.
Yeah, and that thing. But I ask, is activism a lucrative career? But I would have to probably follow that up too with, is activism a status thing now, where it's like, if you're with this group, BLM is like the New York Yankees, and maybe like Ice Cube is like the Minnesota Twins or something. It's where it's like who you align with matters, maybe kind of status wise. And I think, like you said, the nation not being limited to only investing in the nation. Huey, Panthers, not only exclusively bailing out Panthers, but when we see Ice Cube's contract that he wrote, and he goes on Roland Martin interjects his interview, like, why didn't you just come bow under them and be a part of that? And that's a different type of that's something more than activism, because now that's like we're pretty much saying that like you don't have the status to talk on this.
You raise a good point, and I think we talked about this, and Sav talked about this on one of our past episodes. When we say activism, it's changed throughout times.
Yeah.
What do we define as activism nowadays? Because you have people that are what in the past they would call them armchair revolutionaries. They just sit down and talk a bunch of stuff, but they not going out there getting their boots on the ground. Nowadays, a person can go hold a sign somewhere and come back and say, I'm an activist.
See, that's the thing. But again, that's going back to what Brother Jay said. Because by definition, that is activism.
Yeah.
Because the policy or action of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. So me sitting in my mother's basement writing, think pieces on Facebook, it is activism.
You're being active.
Yeah, I have to ask a question. So what has social media done to the visibility of activists? So, now, like you said, people can just be on their phones or their devices and they can call themselves an activist, but the power of social media is making something trendy, or making something a trending topic. So now I think with that visibility and the power of social media, now being an activist is something that's cool. I remember days when being an activist was not seen as a cool thing. You know what I mean? So, and
there's other elements now with the social media that are included into the formula of an activist that normally used to be, null. It didn't necessarily matter what you looked like in the civil rights movement. But now if you're physically attractive and you have a social message, that message is liable to go viral, and now you have X amount of followers. So now your voice is more powerful than, someone else maybe who is practicing activism, not necessarily because you're more passionate about it, but because you're really hot, or you're really popular, or you're really this, whereas it seems like there was a little bit more of like a meritocracy in the original practice of it. And there wasn't so much of a recognition of the participant. We had to do a lot of hardcore research to learn the key figures who were in the Montgomery bus boycott, or even, when Brother Ed brought up with his grandfather, there was a lot of pretty much behind the scenes support back then. It seems like now there is no behind. Everything is it's for the culture and the cameras.
It depends on who we let pick and choose as our spokespeople as activists. By saying that, meaning are we allowing the corporations to define the activists for us because they're aligning their pockets with what they want? And what I mean by that is that someone is thrust on the scene and now they have a sponsorship and they're an activist. And we say, well, I didn't cast my vote as that person to be the person that's the voice or the outspoken voice. Meaning when we look at terms like activist or a person that's on the news and they have the title underneath them, activist, it's like, how did you get to be that, like, leader? We'll say black leader. Who defines who the black leader is? Did we all sit down? Did we all get to go to the meeting and cast our vote and say, this is the person that speaks for me?
Well, I got another question. We ask, is it lucrative, as a status? But I'll say, has activism become a monopoly? Because if we look at in the past, in the civil rights era, there were alternating views as to what the solution was. And, some may have been more, had more visibility or looked at more favorably than others, but you had more than one option. You had a Martin, you had a Malcolm, you had, various things like that. Now you have what seems to be at least a BLM monopoly. I never hear people talk about Dream Defenders, which is another, social activist organization, and it was founded by a brother who I went to undergrad with. But this is an organization that was started at the same exact time, pretty much as BLM. But who is if you don't support, and not only being a monopoly in one organization, I think a monopoly in one view, which is a social activist leftist view, and that doesn't necessarily represent all black people.
To answer that question, I don't put that onus on the organization. I put that on the people to do their research, because we have active grassroots organization here in Houston that people drive by every day and they don't support. That's right up under their nose. So I'm not looking for the one that has the spotlight on them, because it'll look like they have a monopoly when they really don't. They're just marketed to the public better per se. Let's just say, oh yeah, we know about them because we see it.
But
It's
that
there.
wouldn't that be a monopoly though? If one organization gets $90 million and the next 90 organizations don't have $1 million, then I mean by nature.
But they don't monopolize. I guess what I'm thinking is they don't have a monopoly on the struggle per se.
Okay, it's like being the only outlet.
Yeah, they're not
Okay.
the only outlet. We have various other outlets. Now they may not get the same funding, and they may not have the same notoriety, but they're out there. That's like saying, does Jay-Z have a monopoly on hip hop? No, he doesn't. Everyone
Okay,
can
I
make
feel
hip hop.
that.
He's just the most popular, and he may be the person that benefits financially from the most. But that doesn't mean he has a monopoly. Like nobody else can make hip hop unless they go through Jay-Z. So that's
great
that's
point.
What
That's
what I meant by it.
Point received.
Go ahead.
I'll say this: if I was to, try to be objective as possible, because one thing about us that I like, we don't make the decision for the people. We present a case, and we allow the jury to come up with a verdict.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
if I were to take an objective and try to present from a BLM standpoint, I say, well, hey, Marcus Garvey, they had a financial impact in part of their agenda. We're an activism group. We're not a organization that started to bring economic empowerment to people. So that's not even in our wheelhouse. And what would that? I don't know.
But I would have to ask what's in your wheelhouse then. What if you're an organization and you're a 501c3, what's in your wheelhouse? You're a non-for-profit organization. What's your mission statement? Okay, is the funding and everything that you get, is it aligned with your mission statement? Only thing I know that people are familiar with is a hashtag, the BLM or the Black Lives Matter. That name has become prominent. And now, as far as the origin of it, from what I understand, was the 2013, the murder of Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of George Zimmerman. That started it. And then we go to the Mike Brown case. So we started hearing this Black Lives Matter. And then May 2020, just not too long ago, the brother from Houston, George Floyd, was killed by the officer, and that trial is currently going on in real time. And that's when, from what I understand, Black Lives Matter, their financial prominence came into play at a grand level of collecting $90 million within a year. So now, you got that money. What's your mission statement? We've talked about the transparency of, okay, Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee. However you feel about it, Tuskegee University is here. It's been here over 100 years. Marcus Garvey. We saw some tangible outcomes. Now, everything didn't succeed, but there's documented tangible outcomes. We didn't really get into the Nation of Islam as much. We talked about the Panthers, some tangible outcomes, breakfast program. They were fighting for medical.
Yeah.
We wanted medical care for people in our communities. Nation of Islam, I mean, you can go with the Nation of Islam, it's a lot. I mean, and they're a religious organization, right? They're not a socially active organization. They're not a political organization. But from the mission statement of Elijah Muhammad is self-sufficiency. Once again, that word is self-sufficiency. An organization started in the 1930s that by the 1960s had over 70,000 members, right? So now you have those members. Now BLM, I'm not comparing those two, but they're not I don't know if it's membership driven. I know they have chapters, but one of the things with the NLI was, let's just say Muhammad Speaks, the newspaper. We know the Final Call. Before it was the Final Call, is Muhammad Speaks. It was a paper, a black printing crew. They were able to sell at its peak 950,000 issues of Muhammad Speaks. And this was around from like 1960 to 1975 when that newspaper was in circulation. That money allowed them to get farmland, open restaurants, grocery stores in the community. So now you're seeing the tangible outcomes of that money. If someone was to say, hey, you guys are selling those newspapers, where's that money going? You see that Salam restaurant over there in Chicago? That's
Yeah.
us. You see that grocery store you're going to? That's us. You see that? That's us. You're seeing the tangible outcomes from the financials
No,
that
most
that
definitely.
organization is collecting.
Now I'm gonna take my objective hat on, and I'm gonna just say, hey, this is just one thing, because you did send the Black Lives Matter Global Network, which had a breakdown. That was my first time seeing a breakdown.
Yeah,
of the
we're
fund.
gonna have to make this a part 2. I want this to be a part 1 because I want us to really dive deeper, and I want to
But I do want to just say, don't put this on the E, don't put this on the Sav. Just Rob.
this is Rob J speaking.
Yeah, this is Rob J speaking.
The views and opinions.
Of just me.
Yeah.
What I did see, and I was surprised to learn today, though, was that of the 90 million, and there was about $21 million given in grant. I mean, $100,000 grants given to 30 organizations, totaling about 21 point something million dollars. And of those 30 organizations, 23 are led by either trans or LGBT. And then when I went through the organization, what I counted was 28 that seemed to serve that crowd. But more importantly than that, what I counted was 0 that served black men, black fathers, black kids growing up without a father, black mentorship, scholarships for black kids, anything dealing with black marriage. None of those things, black rent assistance for black men. Yeah. None of those things.
The nuclear family.
Yeah, none of those things were in it. But these $90 million were raised behind the corpse of a black man, a cisgendered black man. So to me, I do think from a moral standpoint, it is just unethical to raise money on a type of black men and then not serve that same segment of black. And it's almost like their inclusion excludes the very type of black person that brings them a certain level of awareness. And you just could not do that with any other segment of America. There's no way that some men could have a domestic violence movement where they were raising awareness for it, and then they raised money for domestic violence, but then they spent that money on a cause outside of that, or didn't give it to women directly. They used women who were victims of domestic violence, but then donated the money to charities that serve boys who were molested. That would be a problem. There's no way you could organization could raise money on behalf of stopping Asian hate, and then spend that money on Latin schools. It would be considered unethical. So I support the any activism. If you want to support LGBT, trans, I think everyone deserves support, but it's not right morally to take money on behalf of cisgendered black men that are slain by the police, and none of that money go back to.
I want you to save some of those bars.
I'm done. That's it. That's all I got.
Because I want you to save some of those bars.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got, man.
The next episode, want to leave y'all on the cliffhangers.
Yeah, hey,
we're gonna dig deeper into that and really dissect.
Most definitely. My bad.
Those organizations. No, that was a good.
Yeah. Hey, but no, it's all good.
Real.
But that's all I got.
Because I want to discuss the compromise. There have been certain activists that have been compromised throughout the history. So next week, I want to touch on that. I want to dig deeper into what you just talked about.
Most definitely.
And present some tangible evidence.
Most definitely.
So this is GHH.
Hey, GHH, Rob J, 10X, man.
Equality. Hey, thank y'all. Tune in next week for part 2.
Peace.
If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour. If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour.